again. Welcome to history as we see it from the heart of America here in Kansas City. Today is a very big day and we hope it goes peacefully. Kind of tired of the embarrassment that has been brought to our country by people who live in our country. The worst kind of terrorists, domestic terrorists. Although I started listening again to Jello Biafra when he speaks on his opinion blog. Here's all this street construction during the day, and he makes some very good, valid points. It's important not to paint a whole lot of people as terrorists who really aren't. They're just people who've expressed their opinions, and we may disagree with their opinions, but as long as they're not causing any problems for other people, not being violent or silly, it's fine. Because what is this guy doing? Stopped in the middle of the road and got out of his pickup truck. Maybe something was falling out of his bed. But it wasn't too long ago when America suffered a severe terrorist attack. Actually, not too long ago. It was like 20 years ago now. Almost 20 years ago. It'll be 20 years ago this year. And I remember the chill factor that went out when people tried to say things like, hey, don't assume that all Muslims are evil or are plotting this, or, and they got ostracized and labeled as traitors and sympathizers with the terrorists, and if you're not with us, you're against us. Really that's not a very productive way of thinking. It's very destructive, and I just remember the shrillness that was happening at the time. And I didn't agree with it then. I don't really agree with it now. I don't think that, like I say, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of people on all these issues, but defend their right to say them. I'm reminded of a time when I and a bunch of other people stood up to defend the rights of what essentially was a neo-Nazi to speak. And it was at my university. And this lady came to talk about Holocaust deniers and the evils of Holocaust denial and everything, which, we all agreed with. There's no problem with that. But one guy got up to speak. He was a very well-known right-wing, kind of extreme opinions. I wouldn't say he was an extremist. He just had extreme opinions. And everybody knew he was a racist and a Nazi and all this other stuff. And he got up and he said, well, I am a Holocaust denier and I believe blah, blah, blah. And before he could get out any words, the lady who was speaking said, well, you need to be arrested. Where is your security people for the school? You do not speak about this. You know, you do not have this opinion. All of us just kind of shuddered, went, whoa, we don't agree with this guy at all, but he has the right to speak. And that led to a whole bunch of editorials, to the point that the newspaper had to shut the comment section down. They were tired of hearing it. I don't know if they were back then you communicated through the op-ed in the newspaper. And I don't know if the newspaper was just sympathizing with the woman who came to speak, or because, this guy and another guy had been kind of, they had kind of become the voice of Rush Limbaugh in our school. And I actually kind of made friends with the more reasonable, smarter guy, who was partnered with the racist neo-Nazi guy. And then, I kind of got to know both of them. I ended up just not liking, because he was, the second he thought you were listening to him, he started dropping the N-word this, N-word that, and I was like, I don't believe in that crap. And anyway, but yeah, when somebody gets up there and says we need to use the force of law enforcement to shut down anything we don't like to hear, well, that's that's a step in the wrong direction, and we've seen a whole lot of that this week. Matter of fact, we've seen a whole lot of that over the past 4 years. This time it's a lot of Republicans and Republican wingnuts. Tomorrow it'll be, today, liberals and liberal wingnuts and Democrats calling for people to shut up. And it leaves a lot of us in the middle kind of going, no, that's not right. That's, we believe in this country that we can peaceably gather and express our opinions and our different points of view. And we can even respect people on the other side and try and be empathetic and understanding of why there is another side, with the hope that everybody can compromise and come to the middle. I mean, I remember in my lifetime when you would have Republicans and Democrats in Washington, people on different sides of the aisle, who could fight tooth and nail over policy, but then they could come together and come up with laws which were a compromise between both points of view. And I remember that there was a time when these people would say, this Republican guy over here is my best friend. I like him better than a lot of Democrats that I know. I disagree with him on things politically, but I respect and like the guy. And now we don't have that. Now we have the extreme ideologues saying these people are inhuman and we should hate them because they put an R next to their name, or we should. And no, that's not the way it works. Washington, the general and our first president, believed very strongly, he was against factions like this, against parties, the party system. But it turned out to be a pipe dream, because apparently when you have different philosophies of life, that translates into people forming groups that get people who are sympathetic to the different. I'm looking at this Buick Skylark next to us, and I'm trying to think what. Kansas Antique. It's in really, really beautiful shape. It looks like an original. It's not been hot rodded. That's about a, I'd say, a 65 or a 66. My father had a, I believe a 1965 Chevy Chevelle Malibu, and he got it when we lived in Oklahoma, and then we moved to Guam, and he had it shipped overseas because we're in the military. So we drove it around Guam. It was a two-door, straight six, 3 on the tree, which was back then the standard car. There were a lot of them. The engines were very reliable. They got fairly good gas mileage for the time, not really great by today's standards. And if you really didn't want to spend a lot of money on a car, you could get easy to maintain and all that good stuff. So we left Guam. He sold the Chevy. My mom sold it for him, Chevy Chevelle. She had to because he was stationed back here stateside. And then he drove across country in a car that he bought, and he paid $100 for it. He went and found out that he and my uncle went out searching for this car, and they didn't have a whole lot of time to get it. So he brought it cross country, and it was a Chevy Biscayne, a 1967 Chevy Biscayne on the tree, straight six. It was a bigger car than the Chevelle, kind of almost like a land yacht. And when he showed up at the airport, me and my sister were excited. We're going to see my dad show up in a brand new car, and here he shows up in this white Chevy bomb car with primer painted on the rear deck lid, and we were so disappointed. Oh. And now I wish I could have that car. Or even better was the I believe it was a 1970 Chevy Nova that he had, a 4-door, 3 on the tree, with a straight six. Metallic blue. A little dent in the back by the rear tail light, but that was also a great car. That one was killed by the floods of Houston. We brought it into, my dad was, after he retired from the Air Force, was working for the oil companies in Houston, and we went out to visit one time, and it flooded, and water got in the engine and messed up the engine. Water and car engines do not mix. So I guess Americans have to master the art of getting along. It's worked pretty well for us so far, and now we've allowed media and the internet and our own boredom to get us so divided just because we're bored. And people want to go into Washington and start a revolution with their vloggy cameras, and so they can generate 1 million hits on YouTube. And you got these people who are listening to these crazy whack conspiracy theories and are like hook, line, sinker, turned into zombies almost. Like they don't have a brain anymore. It's just all absorbed in this game of, oh my God, the satanic Democrat pedophiles. And the interesting thing about that is that there has been this game in Washington. I'm not going to pin it on one side or the other. I'm going to say both sides are equally as guilty. And power and politics and powerful men, and what do powerful men do when they have power and opportunity? A lot of them, and not very high morals, a lot of them seek out young, sexy people so they can play power games with them. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows in Washington that forever there was a game among congressmen involving their pages. Let's see who can bed the most pages, or it's almost like a sport. And yeah, I do believe, actually it's kind of been proven that there is a pedophile ring in high circles of power. I mean, that's definitely true. It's always existed in high. You go all the way back in history, and you can see the kings they took a fancy to, my lord, you don't want her, she's 12. And the king would say, well, I'm king. I make the laws. I don't care. I don't care if I'll destroy this person. You guys enable me with all this power, I can exploit whoever I want. And even in modern democracies, we have issues with that. As a matter of fact, all over Europe, there have been controversies involving powerful men having affairs with young, oftentimes opportunistic, I'm not going to say women, and in some cases there have been powerful women who've done the same thing. I say that because there's been quite a few people caught over the years, sometimes high and mighty moral, quote unquote, Republicans who are against this kind of thing, have been caught with their young male concubines. But I do believe that there has been a ring of forcing young people into these compromised positions by people of power, and we've had actual proof that this does exist. I mean, what do you think Jeffrey Epstein is all about? Who do you think his clients are? Why do you think he died? Conveniently a mysterious suicide. But he was buddies with everyone, and they all denied knowing him. All deny, oh well, it was just you were seen sitting on his front porch of his that island he had that was dedicated to basically and Bubba Clinton is denied that he had anything to do with any of that. But there's a picture of Bubba Clinton with Jeffrey Epstein on that island. What is it? I can't remember the name of the prince in England. He's pretty much caught red-handed and outed. Yeah, he was involved in it, and he was a participant. And this kind of sickness, it's sort of like a seal, you will give me what I want, because remember that one time you entrusted me with your quote unquote needs, and I provided. Well, now I have something to hold over you. So yeah, whether Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide or not, it is no surprise that he's not alive to tell the tale. And a lot of victims wanted to see justice, and they wanted to face him in court. And they didn't get that chance. Somebody, either Jeffrey Epstein killed himself and took it away from him, or somebody else did. But I don't buy into the QAnon nonsense, because it's designed to appeal to one way and one side. I mean, it's kind of like all these people running around saying the elections were stolen. And again, I talked about Jello Biafra. This is the latest thing that he said. He talked about that, and I agree. Let's investigate all these elections, but let's go all the way back and investigate all of them. And you'll find out that there's enough guilt on both sides in this regard. I say that right now, if you were to really do some investigations on election fraud and everything, I don't think the Republicans would come out being too pretty on that. They'd be kind of like, you can stop investigating now. It's all a lie. It's all fake news. I'm like, no. You guys called for investigations into election fraud, and we found it. And guess who's guilty? But yeah, I mean, that goes both ways. And there have been dirty actors on all sides. Like I say, it doesn't matter what a person's polarity is. I could give a S less. When people are determined that they want power, which party they're in doesn't matter. If you're going to say that there's these people playing power games and making a sport out of sexual activity with young, impressionable college kids, high school, or younger, unfortunately, in some cases, then don't just say, well, it's the Democrats doing it. It's not. It's not just the Democrats. It's the Republicans, too. It's all of them. A lot of Republicans have been caught red-handed doing things that, the saying goes, methinks he doth protest too much. When you have a person who goes to extreme measures of like homophobia and hating gay people and being moralistic about it, the definition of homophobia for many people is not the fear of gay people. It's the fear of the gay person within a person's inside a person. Afraid of heights are not afraid of falling. They're afraid of jumping. There is that self-destructive instinct in all of us, and part of our lizard brain when we catch ourselves being quite ugly on the inside and realize that we have to resist that. And who cares if you're gay or not? And some people, I guess, are so closeted and afraid of it that they act out. And a lot of gay people say, you know what, I believe that this person who is on an extreme rampage, a crusade against homosexuals, is actually a homosexual themselves. In the city of Topeka, we've had the Phelps family, who's gone to extremes to say that God hates gay people and God hates anybody who enables gay people, and America is doomed because we allow gay people, don't execute them right away on the spot. And people are like, what's up with this? Why are they so extreme? And the theory has always been that, well, Mr. Phelps was actually caught red-handed doing something, so to cover it up, he went on this extreme rampage and got so much attention from it that it kind of became his groove. Quite often the root of a lot of hatred are not things that are on the outside of people that they're reacting to, but things on the inside of people. And I think with the tightening economy and tough times, I think that's really true, that there's a lot of people who actually have a lot of fear and loathing bubbling up inside of them of their own selves, their own situation, and they manifest it in an external way of joining up with hate groups and blame others. And like I say, we don't need a civil war. We need a good psychiatrist, psychologist. People need the proper medicine and the right therapy, I think, rather than let's have a civil war, something that resembles Syria. I don't think anybody really wants that. But there are people who fantasize what war is like and think it's a great thing. The problem, we have too many war movies that glorify it and not enough showing of the reality of it. When modern weapons go off against human bodies, it's not a pretty thing. Picture an explosion of shrapnel and bodies and parts and guts flying everywhere. And, a sea of blood. Imagine a battlefield the way it really is, where the battlefield is just covered in so much gore that you don't even recognize that there were actually human beings at one time crawling across the landscape trying to kill each other. And that has been true since the mid 1800s, even before that. But when we started to industrialize and much more horrible, but our tactics weren't keeping up with the weapons. In the American Civil War, people were still trying to use and were studying Napoleonic techniques. But between Napoleon and the American Civil War, weapons became much deadlier. Rifles became accurate because they went from being muskets to rifles. Now the definition of a rifle that goes in a barrel, that's where you get the name rifle. And what rifling is a spiral groove pattern cut into the barrel, and you take a bullet which is softer. The metal of the bullet is softer than the metal of the barrel, and when it gets superheated and explodes through the barrel, it catches in those grooves and it spins. That makes it incredibly accurate. It goes very straight. You aim the rifle and it goes straight, and it goes very, very far. Muskets weren't able to shoot that far, and they weren't very accurate. That's why we had massed formation of troops, because it was the shotgun effect. You get a whole bunch of people with these inaccurate muskets, and they fire their muskets at once, and it's like a shotgun. You're going to hit something. You're going to thin out the other guy's forces. But with rifling, if you stood up, you were dead. If somebody was aiming at you, they would hit you. And there's descriptions of battlefields like Antietam, when soldiers are crawling through cornfields, and saying that they had to lay really, really low because there was so much fire going overhead that if you just stuck your hand up, you'd lose all your fingers. That was true of the Crimean War. The Crimean War was probably considered to be one of the first really modern wars. And after the Crimean War, people began to realize, oh, you know what? War is not glorious, charging with horses and rattling of sabers and demonstrating your bravery and chivalry. War is just horrible, random death. If you charge into an open field, you're going to get mowed down. One of the problems that they had with the Union in the Battle of Gettysburg was that they needed to dig into defensive positions, and the commanders were vehemently against it. It was not chivalrous, it was not brave to do that. I'm like, well, you're going to get your whole unit killed. I mean, not like normal 5-10% casualty rate. You're going to get 80, 90, 100% casualty rate, because the nature of warfare had changed. Why do I talk about this? Because I've said before, war is not romantic, it's not pretty. I would like to see really accurate war simulations. I'm totally against watching horror movies. I hate horror movies. And I don't even like to watch accurate, very well represented, horrible battle movies. Like Saving Private Ryan, where you actually see what happens in modern warfare. People getting blown up, blown to bits. And even though their bodies are laying in pieces, they're still moaning for their mothers. I mean, that gets into your head when you think about it. They say that the last words of many a dying soldier is, "I'm sorry, Mama, please." It's really sad and harrowing to think about. Yeah, let's glorify war. Let's turn our country into a war zone. Very, very smart. Stupid ass conspiracy theories. Response, and it's an appropriate response. It's not a response that's going to get much of anything from people. Is when people are just fully head-on brainwashed, convinced they're 100% right, challenging you, saying, the election was stolen, and you say, well, prove it. That's the response. Prove it. And they won't. They'll just keep babbling on about how it was stolen and they have proof. And I'm like, well, let's see it. I'm interested. And unfortunately, that just encourages people and threatening you and telling you that you don't have a right to speak. That you're not a patriot, you're a traitor. End this here. Watching.